Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. This is Trusty Rusty Depot, and in this second lesson of Rust, we're going over variables and constants. Now, before we get started, we need to create a new project. And to do that, we can run the command cargo new, and then we can name it something like variables. And now, if we go inside the variables directory, and we can list files, we can see that we have this source folder. And if we go inside the source folder, we can see the main.rs file, which is where all of our code is going to go. So if we open that up with our favorite editor, we can see that we have this first line, which is the main function. FN stands for function, and we'll go into functions later. But the important thing right now is this is the first function that will be called, so all of our code should go inside this function. Now, a second thing we need to learn is comments. Any line that starts with this double slash will be ignored by the compiler, and so it won't generate any errors. In addition, we can do multi-line comments by having a slash star and then putting a star slash, and then we can do multi-line comments, and anything between will be ignored. So those are comments, and that allows us to write comments about our code, and I'm going to use those to show you what I'm going to be talking about today. So variables in Rust, and also in most other languages if you're familiar with variables, are sort of like containers that store values, except that in Rust, these containers can only store one type of variable at a time. So to define a variable, we can use the keyword let, and then a name, and in Rust, the standard is to put all names in lowercase and with an underscore in between words. So it's called snake case. So variable 1, and then we put an equal sign, and we can put a value. Now this value depends on what type we want it to be. So for example, there are number types which allow us to store numbers. And one number type is the usize, which is unsigned, or in other words, positive numbers whose size is automatically chosen. And we can just write that as a 1. However, the compiler will automatically guess what type we want to give it. In this case, it will automatically guess usize, and usually it will just guess usize as a default. But if we want to define a specific type, we can put a colon here and write usize, and it will define this variable as a usize variable. Now, another number type is a isize, which is an integer number whose size is automatically chosen. And same thing, we can write variable 2, and we can put isize, and here we can put negative numbers. For example, negative 2. If we were to put a negative number on the usize, and we cargo check, we can see that we get an error because a usize cannot be negative. So if we go back and we change this back to a positive number, there are also text types that store text. So one example of that is the char, or character type, and we can put variable 3 char equals, and these are always in single quotes, and we need exactly one character, so we can put a space here. And if we don't put a character, we will get an error that it's empty. So we have to put exactly one character here because that's the type. Another text type is the string, and there's actually two common types of strings in Rust. There's the one called anstir, which is also commonly called a string slice. This one is written between quotes, as you would expect. So we can put anstir equals text. And string slices are usually used inside of a program that they don't change. However, the second type, called strings, are generally used when you need to manipulate them because you can change them. And these are a bit harder to define. One way to define a string is to put string from and then put the string slice inside of here like text, and that would make a string. Or we can put just a string slice like text and then put .toString at the end, and that would also make it a string. Now those are the most common types of strings, and there's a lot more types. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and you can even create custom types, and we'll get to that in a future video. Now another important thing to know about variables is that by default they cannot be changed. If we take the first variable and we add 1 to it, plus equals 1, which is just the same as saying variable 1 equals variable 1 plus 1. That's the same thing. So if we save this and we cargo check, we see that there's an error because this variable was not allowed to be changed because it is not mutable. It's immutable. And the compiler is telling us that we can add this keyword mute to it to make it mutable so that we can change it later. So if we put mute here and we save it and cargo check, we now see that it is not an error. And we're getting all of these warnings because we are not using these variables in our code. And if we want to stop seeing these, we can go and add a line that says allow unused variables. And now if we cargo check, we don't see those unused variables warnings. Now, another important thing about variables is that even though they're not mutable, if we wanted to recreate a variable with the same name as one before, we still can. It's called variable shadowing, and we can do that by saying, for example, let's create a new variable but with the same name as the last one, and we'll give it a type of string. And now we can change the type because we are creating a whole new variable. So that is variable shadow. Another type of variable is called constants, which are defined using the keyword const, and they have a name that has to be in upper snake case, which means the words all uppercase letters and have underscores in between. So we can put constant, and also these have to be type annotated. We have to say what type these are. So if we put iSize, we can put a number 4 here, and this will be our constant. And constants are different than variables because they can never be changed. If we try to change this to a 5, we will get an error if we try to compile it, because constants from the name have to stay constant. Now, what are constants used for? Constants are useful if you want to define them outside of this scope of this function, and we'll explain more about scopes in later videos, but we can define it outside so that the whole program can access this constant. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.